Rescue teams have widened the search for missing diggers off Queensland's Whitsundays coast. An exclusion zone of more than 100 kilometres is now in effect as we start to learn more about the 4 crewmen. 2 of them are fathers to young children, another the son of a New South Wales policeman. Attention is also turning to the future of the Taipan helicopter fleet. It has been marred with problems for months. Joining me live now is Professor John Blaxland from ANU. Professor Blaxland, thanks so much for your time. And as I ask you these questions about the Taipan, we know that you and I both have the families in mind as this search continues, but we have to talk about the Taipan. You have previously spoken about problems it has had over several years. Talk us through it. What are your concerns, and what have your concerns been for quite some time?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Laura, good to be with you. The Taipan helicopters had problems since the get-go, if you like. Purchased in 2004, introduced into service in about 2007. It was a fly-by-wire, high-tech, advanced technology, advanced, helicopter design that was cutting edge, but perhaps not quite ready for use. And in trying to introduce it into service has generated a series of problems. Initially, technology, the floor wasn't strong enough, the door wasn't wide enough to fit the troops coming in and out while having a protective gun emplacement there for any kind of hot insertion type situations. Then we've had software issues, we've had crashes, we've had issues like we saw just back in March of the helicopter being downed. Now, all of these things have been remediated one at a time. A series of issues have been done, measures have been taken to rectify what's been the fault, but it does seem to be a bit of a problem child. This has been a platform that's generated enormous downtime for maintenance. It's been generating huge cost blowouts for keeping it serviceable, and effectively, of the 47 helicopters, we're lucky to have half of that fleet available at any one time, and often considerably less than that. And of course, now we've got the situation where the helicopter's gone down. We don't really know what happened and why. They need to recover the aircraft. They need to recover the bodies. And only then will we really be able to discern exactly what went wrong. Was it pilot error? Was it weather? Was it mechanical? Was it something to do with poor service? Maybe there was a glitch and somebody maybe didn't quite connect the dots between somebody handing over the serviceability certification. Maybe also there's issues with the software. We've had a number of issues with software before. So there's a range of factors that need to be identified and then eliminated before a sound decision can be made, mindful that we've got it probably a year or more before we can get the replacement Black Hawk helicopters into service. So we've got a shortfall, particularly for the Special Operations Forces, and that's problematic.
Given these problems, a laundry list that you've just given us, why were they still being flown, even in training?
So all of the immediate obvious problems had been remediated. Right. So, the Defence Force has got very rigorous processes in place for actually addressing a concern, identifying it, and then figuring out a way to fix it. So all of those have been successively addressed. So it's not unreasonable that it should be operated if all of those checks were actually in place. Let's not forget, the Defence Force, we operate a boutique Defence Force. It's a small one. People think it can do everything, but it's a fraction of the size of the Defence Force of the past. We rely on quality over quantity, and we thought we were getting the best quality we could, but in fact, really, we should have gone with the American Black Hawks. We are going with the Black Hawks. It's going to take time to get them into service. And in the meantime, we've got a question about how we manage the shortfall. Clearly, the Taipans are going to be out of action for quite some time because the air safety investigators have to really rule out all of the possibilities of what's happened, identify the nub of the issue, and then decide whether it's a systemic problem. That means that the whole fleet stays grounded, or whether there was an issue that could have been addressed on the spot that might be able to be rectified and get the fleet operating again. Otherwise, we're going to have to probably hire some commercial helicopters to fill the gap. And even then, it won't fully fill the gap because the special operators, they need special capabilities that were inherent in the Taipan and that will come with the new Black Hawks. So short of that, we have a bit of an issue. The special operations folk don't want to talk about that too much because that affects their capabilities, and they don't like advertising that fact. But there are significant concerns there.
Yeah, there certainly would be. If there wasn't before, there would certainly be now, Professor. Talk us about the history here, because they've always been contentious from what I can understand. Is it true that they were kind of imposed on the ADF? This wasn't their preferred procurement?
Definitely, the preferred procurement was the Black Hawk. We had Black Hawks before. It would have made sense to follow through with getting more Black Hawks. I understand the European Air Defence EADS system, the systems people from Europe were very persuasive about how this was going to set up Australia as a Southern Hemisphere hub for European helicopter manufacture and maintenance and servicing, and that was going to be good for Australia. But it did fly in the face of the advice from the Navy and the Army, who clearly wanted the Black Hawk / Seahawk, which is derivatives of the same model. To be fair, though, ministers in the past have made some good calls. Sometimes the advice from the department hasn't been the greatest. For instance, the ministers in the past have made the call on the Super Hornets. That was not coming from the government, from the bureaucracy, but we now wouldn't want to be without them. Same with the C-17s, the Globemaster aircraft that have been incredibly useful. So sometimes like, ministers Professor, do get it right, sometimes not.
And the alliance, aligning ourselves with the US and what the US procurement process is and what they do, it seems like we should probably go down that path. I mean, I do note there's been a defence acquisition and announcement for Victoria in just the last week that it's the first Asian nation to be providing these particular military hardware. I mean, what's your view on that going forward? Should we, just follow the US in this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Hanwha deal is a really good one. It's a great piece of kit, and it's pretty much NATO standard. I mean, the thing is, the Koreans operate with the Americans, so this is not a system that's incompatible with what we're going to do with the Americans. What we've tried to do over the decades is kind of hedge our bets about investing too much in American system and maybe buying European stuff, and now we've got some Korean stuff in the mix. The key thing for us is that we're compatible with the United States and with the Koreans, they are already, that's very important for them as well. So there's a commonality there already. And of course, for Korea, I'm not mindful that they are a hair trigger away from a war resuming, because their border with North Korea is right there, right next to the capital city of Seoul. They feel the vulnerability way more than we do. They are really keen to invest in Australia as a kind of a backup production facility as well. So there's a lot of utility in collaborating closely with Korea. Korea is kind of this secret. We've actually just commemorated 70 years since the ending of the Korean War. Australia had several hundred people killed in that war. We still have commitments there. And interestingly, the Koreans are looking down south our way to a degree that has not been seen before. And there's a lot of overlap in our interests, a lot of common interests between Australia and Korea as close US allies who can operate in a way that's compatible and of mutual benefit. Interesting to see how that's going to unfold. But the Black Hawk deal, that's something that we're going to try and see accelerate, but there's limits to the production rate that can come out of the factory in the United States. That's the bottom line. So we're probably going to have to get some commercial, civilian type helicopters fill the gap if we find that we can't get the Taipan up into the air safely in the next few months.
Yeah, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Professor Blaxland, great to have you back on the program. I made you late for your next appointment, but thanks so much.